I am the rainforest. I watched them grow up here. They've left, but they always come back. Yes, they always come back. For my trees, their wood, my plants, their medicines. For my beauty, their escape. I've always been there for them, and I have been more than generous. Sometimes I gave it all to them. Now, gone forever. But humans, they're so smart, so smart. Such big brains and opposable thumbs. They know how to make things, amazing things. Now why would they need an old forest like me anymore? Jungles, trees. Well, they do breathe air, and I make air. Have they thought about that? Humans, so smart, they'll figure it out. Humans making air. That'll be fun to watch.
Don't you just wish, like me, that you would have a voice like that? You know, all these videos are actually available on Conservation International's website. You can download them and you can do like I do. You put them on just before you want to relax and fall asleep. It's just wonderful, amazing. You get the nature sound and you get that wonderful voice. All famous Hollywood actors that are doing much the same thing that we are. They are walking the talk and making sure they're part of the sustainable change. Is anybody here hungry? So what we just did over the last 45 minutes was locally eradicate hunger in a sustainable way. Because the food we had was super sustainable, all vegetarian, all low CO2, low fat, good to prevent diabetes, all those things we've been discussing. So we are walking the talk here, but we're just one very, very tiny part of humanity or of the world. So how about eradicating hunger on a global scale? Sounds daunting, sounds impossible. Well, not impossible, and not something that someone is not already doing. Because the Hunger Project is about exactly that. And we're now from Skogstro Feldt, who's the CEO of the Hunger Project. The Hunger Project, or Hunger Projektet, if you want to use it on Twitter, which you should. Hashtag #TheBridgeSummit16, remember that? Åsa is doing exactly that, working to eradicate hunger much more than just on one conference, on the entire planet. Give her a warm hand.
We're talking about big questions here, and I think the ultimate question is, how are we going to live healthy, productive lives in dignity and in harmony with nature? I'm very inspired to have been listening to all of you, and I think the first part of this conference for me has been a great sign of all the leaps forward we're taking together as humanity. This section is going to be about energy, renewable energy, and we need to work on that with all the technology that we have and will invent. But what about the human energy? Is the human energy renewable? That's a question that I would like to address. The big topic, I think, for all of us to think about and to align on when we leave here is that we should have a shared vision, and I can feel that we have a shared vision of this world where we all live together in harmony with the nature and each other. But what does it take to reach that? Well, it takes a focus on the holistic vision and aligning ourselves, working not side by side like we are today, but to converge, to have truly shared visions, commitments, and action plans. The great news, which you've already heard, is that we have already agreed on a vision. We can see it clearly. It's the Sustainable Development Goals. They were ratified in the United Nations on the 25th of September last year. It was a big day for us as peoples of the earth. We actually decided to have a lot of zero goals, which is a big step forward compared to the Millennium Goals, where we said, we dare to have as a goal that we have things. We should have poverty. We should have hunger. But now we have said, this is it. We're going to have zero hunger, we're going to have zero poverty, and we're going to have renewable energy for all. That's also in the goals. I know that the goals have been addressed before, and there are many ways to talk about them. One was food yesterday, but I would like to talk about the goals from the glue that we all are, all the people living on the earth, the human component of the goals. Yes, they are ambitious, they are bold, but they are achievable. We can end chronic hunger until 2030. It's a fact. It's also a fact that today we have the lowest level of poverty on the earth that we have had ever. Less than 10% live in extreme poverty today. So we have made achievements. But what do we need to do going forward? How can we all work together on the Sustainable Development Goals? At the heart of the goals, we find sustainability, of course, but we also find equity. We find dignity. We find every person being able to unleash its own potential and using the talent for him or herself, for the village, for the country, and for the world. The challenge is that our world is organized in a very siloed way. And even the goals are organized in a siloed way. There are 17, and they have 169 targets. So what happens if all of us pick one target and start to work on that? It will not be sustainable, because they're interlinked. We need to work together. At the Hunger Project, we have a key question. What's missing? What's missing that, if addressed, would bring us a big leap forward? And we see just that right now. That's what's missing is the holistic, integrated approach where we put people in the center. Because no matter how many innovations, how many technologies, how many top-down solutions we create and implement and systems, there is always the people component, and the human component is the one that is going to drive sustainable change. I cannot change any one of you. I don't know if you've tried with your spouses, husbands, wives, partners. It's very hard to change another person, right? So change has to come from within. We need to work one by one on change. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can put the human energy and how we can renew the human energy to create sustainable change. We have learned 3 big things from our programs. We work in 22 countries, in 18,000 villages in the rural areas, and reaching about 18 million people. And there are 3 major things that we see. One is we need to focus on inclusive economies. That means that women need to be brought to another level in society. The second one is We need to come together when working with change. It's not one person here, one person there, one person there. We need to work together in clusters. Maybe you have heard about the tipping point. To create something new, for a new thing to become mainstream, you need to have a critical mass that thinks the new things. Otherwise, you're just some strange person having a strange opinion that no one will listen to. So you need to have a critical mass of people starting to work in new ways. And you need to connect people in the rural areas to their local democracy, to their system. Because in so many places, there is a gap between what's put in place and the people living in the villages. They don't know how their structure is working, they don't know their rights, they don't know their opportunities, but if you connect them, they can all create a new future for the whole country. So this picture says gender-focused, community-led development. So that is what we do. And as you can see, it connects at least 12 of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's everything from healthcare, education, water, sanitation, energy, women's empowerment, and so forth. So that's the human energy that we need to renew. We have also created a white paper from all the years that we have been working of the different steps that we see are needed to catalyze change. The first one is mindset. If you think that you cannot change yourself, if you think that you're dependent on somebody else, if you're treated like you are dependent on somebody else, if you are not aware of that you can actually do anything if you take it on, nothing will happen. We all need to work on our mindsets and behaviors. That's the context. Then we come to the skill sets, the capacities. So once we have decided, I think I want to work with something else, I want to change the world, I want to take on something, you need to build the capacity, both the knowledge and the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure as well as the social infrastructure. And then it's about impact, creating momentum and working step by step, getting success to lead to success. So we are keeping the energy flowing and renewing the energy and going to a sustainable way where we can do it again and again. The challenge we see is that a lot of approaches in the world is very project focused. Have you heard of agile computer development? Some have. It's a way of, when you work with developing computer programs, you don't know exactly where you're going to be at what time. And it's the same way with human development. We don't know when people will be empowered. When is the milestone when you can say, I'm empowered, I'm taking on this change? So you need to have patience. You need to work again and again and renew the energy again and again. And then when things are ready, you move into the next phase. The challenge is, as I mentioned, that we are so project focused that we want to have a mid and a start and a mid and an end and a clear action that has to happen during this program. That can take us backwards instead of forwards. Because if you don't get the mindset shift, you will not be able to have sustainable results. So we need to address things more in a process-oriented way, in a long-term focused, with patience. So patience, I think, is something we can all think about during the summer. How are we going to build in patience to be able to support sustainable change? Some examples. One of the countries where we work is Mexico. In Mexico, you would think that there would be no hunger and poverty, but there are marginalized indigenous peoples living very far away from the cities that live in hunger and poverty. And when they did their workshop around their vision, they understood that the old way of cooking, having an open fire in the house, was both bad for the health and for the environment and for the time consumption, because the women had to go and find wood to make the fire and then cook and then inhale it. So they did some work on what would it look like to have clean stoves. This is maybe not our vision of a clean stove, but this is so much better than the way it was before. And the success factor of this program was that the community themselves identified this need first. Then they identified possible partners with the help of our facilitators and volunteers. So they found Water for Humans, who were experts in doing this. They took them to the village. They learned how to do this themselves, both how to build and how to maintain, and they implemented it in the village. And what made it so sustainable was that they worked on the financing themselves, and they trained their fellow neighbors so they could go to other villages close by and retrain other people in how to find the money, how to find the partners, and how to build the stoves. So it was a true community-led development. So how can you work with human energy? Well, we work with a methodology we call the Vision, Commitment, and Action Workshop. And the first time it's being done through our local staff and through local volunteers in the villages. All the people of the village come and they start to speak about vision. What happens? Well, half of the people leave because they're used to people coming with handouts. So if there is no instant gratification, why should I stay? But the people who stay and start to think about, what is our vision for our village? How would we like it to be in 10 years, in 15 years? And what would be different than today? They start to think about, what if I didn't have to walk 2 hours every day to fetch water? And that water would be clean. What if I didn't have to spend another 2 hours in finding firewood, which also is further and further away because we've used all the wood close to the village? What if my children would have enough food so they would grow as they should? What if the school had teachers in it? Because I heard that the government, they pay the teachers, but they never show up in our village. What if we had access to nurses and I didn't have to give birth with my mother-in-law as the only help? And they start to visualize and to draw how this village would look like. What would be the different components? And to no surprise, those components are the same as the Millennium Development Goals that we have all agreed upon and signed upon, and which is half of the Sustainable Development Goals. And then, so this sounds very easy, right? It's not that easy. It takes encouragement, it takes thinking, it takes prompting, it takes good facilitation, it takes a lot of meetings to have a joint vision. And then we come to the key part of it. Looking at this vision, if this is the future, who is going to do this? Who is it? Well, maybe it's the government, maybe it's God, depending on who you believe in, or the spirits, maybe it's my father-in-law, but it's someone else normally. Someone should do something. Why doesn't anybody do something? And you know, when you point at somebody else, there are always a lot of fingers pointing at yourself. So the biggest part of this is the mindset change from somebody should do something to I can do something. I can. I'm a talent. I can learn skills. I can get contacts. I can mobilize my neighbors. I can drive change. And if I can, we can. And the power of interconnectedness, the power of taking joint social responsibility is enormous. And that's where the next step has to be some action. And the action typically should not be bringing in something from the outside, because it's then again something else coming in. So what if we all look at our land? We have a lot of land, we know how to grow, but what if we organized ourselves? What if we put a little bit of seed money together and bought seeds that we can plant and take care of? That's an easy action to do if you live in Uganda, for instance, where the land is so fertile that everything you throw will grow. And then you start to create momentum and to go into the next steps of creating the sustainable village. So I want to take you on a trip. This is Mozambique. It's very, very dry, as you can see. And I was there to visit the local office we have and to go into the rural areas and visit our partners on the ground, the people who live in the villages. And they had worked on their vision, and they saw that they needed to have an infrastructure because there were no major constructions where they could meet, where they could have education, where they could have healthcare. So they built what we call the epicenter infrastructure. And that's a joint, collaborative, true partnership where we converge. So the people, they can contribute labor, they can contribute burning of the bricks, they can contribute to all the digging and construction, they can have, sometimes they have woods. The government, they have budgets for wells, they have budgets for nurses, they have budgets for doctors. So if they see that the community themselves have provided a structure that can facilitate that, it's much easier for them to actually deliver the services that they should have done a long time ago. And the part that cannot be found locally is where we, from the Hunger Project, we co-finance the rest that is needed. And it's a commitment where we work, in average, 8 years together with the people on the ground. And that's a long time, but it's what it takes minimum to reach some sustainable solutions. And they had done a lot of work. Before, as you saw, this was just more or less a desert. And now they had created a lot of income generating activities. They had learned how to do drip irrigation. They had learned how to grow different things. They had learned how to work with nutrition. They had learned why it's not good to only eat maize as the only stapleware every day if you want your children to grow and develop a healthy life. They had learned how to process what they grow. So first of all, through the mill, but also to create a value add to the product, so there was also income from selling things in the marketplace. And the epicenter itself had become a marketplace where others came. And they also had 2 nurses who lived there, and they had made 15 baby deliveries every week. The nearest hospital was 50 kilometers away, and there was no ambulance. So the other alternative was to walk far, far away. So now they were super happy with having this many successful births taking place in the center. So I met a wonderful woman. I'm always very inspired of the women I meet. This is Clemencia. And she had a really, really tough life. She was married away very young, as normally is the case in the villages. Once you're a teenager, you're married away. And she got pregnant really fast. She had 2 children before she was 20. And then her husband died. And she had never been to school. She didn't know how to read or write. She had no occupation. And they only lived of what they grew behind the little hut. And as you saw, it was super dry. And she, after a couple of years, got in contact with the committees at the epicenters, and especially the committee that worked with education and vocational training, which means that if you're an adult, you learn how to read and write while, for instance, learning how to grow your farmland. That's vocational training. So she had learned that, and she got so interested in reading and writing that she studied and studied and studied, and now she was a teacher. That's why we stand in the school. But she found, wow, I can do a lot of things now that I can read and write. And what about all these laws that we have that I don't really understand? And then she started to study the laws. So she became a volunteer lawyer, so she could actually read the laws to the women and the men in the village. So, oh, if I'm a woman, I actually have the right to inherit the land if my husband dies. I didn't know that, because my father-in-law took it, and I have to live in the bush. So she also became a lawyer, and while the day we were there visiting, this was a big day for her, because the local government had realized that they needed to do some monitoring and evaluation of the people in the area, and they had offered her a job. You can see her happiness. And she had also worked really, really hard, because they speak Portuguese, as you know, in Mozambique, and she didn't even speak Portuguese. She spoke a local language. And she had learned how to speak English, and she read the most beautiful speech to me. It was very moving. And then she gave me 2 heads. I had to take them, and we brought them from the village and gave them to another village. It was a little bit difficult to bring the hands in the plane to New York. So this is what an empowered woman, full with human energy, looks like. And you can imagine the cadre of human energy when you mobilize people to take action for self-reliance on their own. So the epicenter strategy, that we call it, and we work with this strategy in many countries in Africa because the challenges are similar. There is very little infrastructure, there is very little service delivery, there is no access to credit, and the water and sanitation problems are huge. So this 8-year partnership contains all these parts. And in 2 weeks' time, we are going to go to another country, to Ghana, because the people of 3 groups of epicenters have declared that they are now self-reliant. So we're going to have a huge self-reliance party, and that always includes a lot of dancing and having fun. It's a very, very interesting point in time, because we don't know what comes next. They don't know what comes next. So we are going to learn a lot. So when we have come to this level on the goals that we have set for ourselves, will we be able to continue? Are there things that will backtrack? So we will closely stay in contact with these communities to see what is it. Some targets are very definite, like we need to have a legal entity to be able to run this as a cooperative. We need to own the land to be able to not be taken use of by somebody else. We need to have access to the local districts and what is available from the government. So there are a lot of things that are more or less digital, 1 or 0. And then there are factors like women's empowerment. One of the targets, they say that women should be at least 50% of the ones that run the committees in the community. That's very easy to measure. But the other one is women shall be empowered to make themselves heard. Not only have a seat, but actually speak and have something contribute and to drive. How do you measure that? How do we know when someone is empowered? I usually say you can see it. If you go to a village close by, you see the posture of people, and you see that people are not really looking you in your eyes, then there is no empowerment going on. But when you come to a village where people are empowered, you can see it. CEDA does not take this as a good measurement, though. And we don't either. So that's why we have looked into how can we ask questions. How can we ask questions in the villages of the women, of their families, to see if they are empowered indeed. And it has to do with different factors like, do I earn an income? Do I have a say in the family economy? Do I dare to speak in public? Do I sit on any committees? Do I have a leadership role? How many hours of my workday do I spend on drudgery, on fetching water, wood, and all the other stuff? And how many hours do I spend on actually creating an income or doing things that are better for myself, my family, and my village? So last year we launched what we call the Women's Empowerment Index. So it's a new way for us to monitor and evaluate that soft factor. This is in Senegal. Senegal is also a dry area, and I wanted to take this as an example of renewable energy. So this community saw that they had a lot of bio-waste. And so they also connected with a local expert in how to create biodigester systems where they could make waste into renewable energy and get some fertilizers as well. And the big success factor of this was, again, that they made the prospecting, they made the looking for the partner, they created a funding themselves, and then they learned how to do it and replicate it. So that is another way where we work with renewable energy. So the question is, once you've sparked the energy, once the change process has taken off, how do you renew the energy? It's very nice. I don't know about you. I have new ideas every day. Oh, this must be so good to do this. And then you're like, nah. And you don't stay the course. You don't follow through in the change you want to achieve. So the way we do it is two ways. One is to do the vision, commitment, and action workshop again and again and again. Because you need to get new energy. And you need to feel new skills. Another way to do it is to create networks. You can see a lot of women in this network. In India, we work a lot with the women in the panchayats, which is like the kommunstyrelsen, the local part of the democracy. And women are quoted into the panchayats in India. In fact, 33% of the representatives have to be women. So the Hunger Project in India, they go around and knock on people's doors. This was more 10 years ago when women were not as outspoken. But they didn't even know, in many cases, that they were elected. Because the husband had put the wife's name on the paper and then continue to be the elected person. It's true, right? He's nodding here. So, what does that mean? It means that we have a perfect system on the paper, but in reality there is no change. So the Hunger Prize representatives went knocking on women's doors and said, did you know that you are elected, that you're in a power position and you have a lot of opportunities? No idea. Would you like to learn something about being in this role and what it can do for you and your village? No. It's not that people jump into leadership from one day to another. You need to work a long time with what can this mean for you? What can this mean for your village? And also with the other parts of the family. What does it mean if this woman goes away 3 days that has never left the house before in such a far distance? Who will take care of the family? That's a very important question. So the women get access to a mindset shift, as I spoke of. They get access to skills because they will understand what the schemes are from the government, for instance. There are very good schemes like widow pensions and things that are not being distributed all the way. And they get to learn how to work with inclusive leadership to make sure that all parts of the village, because there are challenges, there are parts of the village that no one wants to talk to or touch. So how to make sure that everyone gets a better life, and how to focus not on the physical infrastructures, but on the social infrastructures. And you can imagine, if you're used to no women being part of deciding anything, and no women speaking up, and no women even looking you in your face, this is a big change. It can be rather threatening. So how do you overcome that? Well, that's where the networks come in. So it's good if it's not only 1 or 2 or 3 women who speak up, but everybody speaks up. Everybody's wives have gone crazy. And that's how you can build a support structure going forward and keep the momentum going. So they become role models and they see their daughters see, I don't have to get married when I'm 12 and I don't really want to. I can get an education, I can be a leader, I can be like my mother. And then the cycles goes away from the bad cycle of malnutrition to the good cycle of leadership. Very powerful. Thank you. These are some other examples. I'm not going to go through them, but resilience is a word that you probably heard a lot. How can we do farming that is good for the environment, doesn't damage the environment, but also how can we create resilience in the way we approach things? Because the fact is that the people living in the rural areas are the ones that gets the worst damages and the emergencies from floods and droughts and all the effects of the climate. It's not us, it's the rural areas where people are very poor that has the hardest with these types of emergencies. So we need to work also creating sustainability, and we do that with a lot of partners. We also work with changing people's mindsets on how to use the river. This is an example from Malawi where you actually cannot see the river right now, but they had a lot of problems with saltation and sedimentation, which affected the hydro energy of Malawi, and that was the only major source of energy in the whole country. And the river having all these problems actually made a lot of power outages, so the economy was going down. So how can you work with all the communities along the river to think about the river and work in a sustainable way with it? I spoke about the Women's Empowerment Index. That's actually an example of the Women's Empowerment Index where you can see where they are in income, in time, in agency. So the last point I want to do is you get what you measure. I don't know if you if you've noticed that in your companies. You get exactly what you measure and all the other things are, well, maybe we'll do them, but this is the thing that's on my development talk, so I'll do that first. It's the same everywhere, so you get what you measure. And if you don't measure, you don't know where you're going. So we have worked with what we call a participatory monitoring and evaluation system. So it's the people themselves who do the monitoring and they do the evaluation. So every 3 months, they meet and see, okay, where are we on literacy? How many % are literate now? How many will have clean water? How are we on women's empowerment? How's the index going? So that's a really powerful tool, no matter where you are, to know your data today, to decide what's missing, to be able to go to your vision. So finally, to conclude, I think this conference is such a great opportunity for us to get out of our silos and start to work together, not side by side, but converge, and to work out of shared visions. We have our vision, we know the goals, and to make sure that we include the human component, to work with communities, no matter if it's a community in Africa or the community of your city in Sweden, to make people lead their own change, because that's the only way it will be sustainable. And I watched a TED Talk with Al Gore lately, and he said that some still doubt that we have the will to act. But the will to act is itself a renewable energy. Thank you.
Wow, the will to act is renewable. Let me just ask you, I think you can be even more specific to these people here. What can they do? What should they do right now to support this?
Well, I think it's like taking care of your finances. You have to have something that's good for the long term, something that's good for the short term, something that's good for the environment, and something that's good for the people. And of course, investing in people gets the biggest return on your investment. So the Hunger Project is always a good place to channel your long-term investments.
All right, wonderful. We'll all have to pick up on that. Thank you so much, Åsa.
Thank you.